All right. Good evening and welcome to the 2021 Mercer Island Candidate Forum. I'm Julie Sarkissian, League of Women member of Seattle-King County, Mercer Island Unit, and I'm also on the state board for the League of Women Voters. Our mission is empowering voters and defending democracy. And though the League of Women Voters is best known for signing people up to vote and candidate forums, we're also active in civic education and lobbying and advocacy. Though we are nonpartisan and do not endorse or support candidates or parties, we do advocate and lobby for legislation that is important to us and that aligns with our values and mission. Tonight, we are very lucky to have all of the candidates running for office in November. We have 4 candidates from the Mercer Island School Board, whom you'll be hearing from first, and later on 6 candidates for running for City Council. Because there are so many candidates, we are limited in the number of questions we can ask and the time we can really give them to answer. So consider this an introduction to our candidates and seek out other information to fill in the picture. For this event, we've partnered with the Mercer Island PTA, and I'd like to introduce Jennifer Crespi. She is the Mercer Island PTA Co-Advocacy Vice President, and she will be introducing our monitor. Jennifer is an educator and parent advocate. In addition to serving on the PTA Council, I have to read this. This woman is very busy. She is the Vice President of the West Mercer PTA, a member of Parent Edge, and is working with the PTA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee that has begun a new committee for special services, abilities, and learning differences. So she does all this on top of being a mom. So welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the candidates for being here, to the League of Women Voters for organizing, and to the audience members for tuning in. This is a particularly important time for the school board. They will be hiring a new superintendent as the current superintendent at the end of the year is retiring. Also, the board is planning to put 2 levies on the February 2022 ballot. Tonight's moderator is Tammy Conrad. Tammy is a recently retired attorney and the leader of the virtual unit of the League of Women Voters, Seattle-King County. This is a Zoom-only unit that is not geographically based and that will continue to meet online even post-pandemic. Tammy?
Thank you and good evening, everyone. As Jennifer indicated, I will be your forum moderator for this evening. Please understand that if we should suddenly have a technical glitch with this virtual forum, we'll try to reconnect as quickly as possible. And if you lose the connection, you may need to sign in again. I'll briefly go over the ground rules for tonight's candidate forums. The ground rules were sent to each of the candidates ahead of time, and they have agreed to abide by them. As the moderator, I will ask the questions and enforce the ground rules. The candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement and 30 seconds for a closing statement. The candidate listed first, alphabetically by position, will answer first. The order of candidates answering each question will then rotate. The time for answers may range from 30 seconds to 2 minutes. A timer will be shown on the screen. The screen turns yellow when 15 seconds are left. The screen will turn red and the word stop will be displayed when time is up. At that point, a speaker may finish his or her sentence, but I will turn off the speaker's microphone if time is exceeded beyond that. Questions were submitted by the audience, by the League, and by the PTA. We received lots of questions from the audience and tried to use as many of those questions as possible. The candidates have not been given the questions ahead of time. This forum will be recorded for use by the League. No other recording of the forum is allowed. The recording may be shared in its entirety only and only with permission by the League of Women Voters. Now, let's begin. We will begin this forum with questions directed to candidates for the school board. The school board candidates are Brian Giannini Upton and Daniel Glowitz for position 2, and Lacey Aker and Deborah Lurie for position 4. Before we get to the questions, each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. In your opening statement, candidates, please tell us why you are running and what you feel are the top 2 challenges for the Mercer Island schools other than dealing with the pandemic. Candidate Giannini Upton, you will begin and you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate everybody being here tonight for this really important election coming up. So my name is Brian Giannini Upton. I'm currently serving in position number 2 on the Mercer Island School Board, and I'm seeking re-election. Over the past 7 years, I've functioned in different levels of advocacy throughout the school district, from room parent and art docent to PTA president and advocate there, on up to school board member. And I also partner with the Washington State School Directors Association. I'm elected to the legislative committee there as a representative for Director Area 2, and I serve as a volunteer on the Federal Relations Network as well. So I advocate locally, regionally, at the state and at the federal level. 2 of the biggest issues I think that are going to be facing us in the coming years. One is going to be the financial situation. So we've known for a long time that Mercer Island School District was shrinking. The birth rates are reducing in King County, and there's a flow that goes with that. What we didn't expect is during the pandemic that would be amplified and sped up. So there's a contraction happening within the school district, and how that budget is managed is going to be really important for the school board and how they work with the district leadership in setting those budgets and aligning those budgets to our vision, our values, and our mission. The second issue is going to be recovery. It's hard to not talk about the pandemic as a part of this. Right now, there's a lot of trauma in our students. There's a lot of trauma with our teachers and with our families. And so I'm really proud that the district has spent the last 4 years refocusing our mission, our vision, and value to addressing the needs of the whole child first, and then being able to provide rigor, high expectations, and acceleration as appropriate. I think right now dealing with the mental, emotional, and physical well-being of our students and staff is going to be paramount as we continue to build up our speed for academics. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, candidate Giannini Upton. Candidate Glowitz, you now have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Hi, I'm Dan Glowitz, and I want to begin by thanking the League of Women Voters and the PTA for hosting this event tonight. I believe that public trust is predicated on transparency, so I welcome this opportunity. I'm running for school board because I believe that Mercer Island can once again be a beacon. As a graduate of Mercer Island High School, I know firsthand what a first-class public education looks like. Like many other families on the island, my wife and I decided to return here when my oldest son, Eli, entered kindergarten. Mercer Island is unique. We are a close-knit, passionate, and well-educated community that lives on an island surrounded by a metropolis that is remaking the world. We are fortunate to call Mercer Island home, a community that values education and has a school district that consistently ranks among the best in the state, although fails to live up to its potential to be among the best in the country. We are, however, at a pivotal moment. Last year alone, we lost 400 students, or nearly 10% of our enrollment. As a consequence, we are facing a budget deficit of $7 million and financial insolvency by the end of the school year. And make no mistake about it, the pandemic is not the problem, nor is it a declining birth rate. Those students are still attending school. It's just that they are doing so elsewhere because the education here is not as compelling as it once was. Second, and relatedly, we are confronting a crisis in public confidence stemming from a district that decides important matters without data or dialogue. Now more than ever, we must set aside the smokescreen of slogans and embrace transformative transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Glowitz. Candidate Aker, you will now have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
I just want to start out by echoing the thanks to the League of Women Voters and the PTA for giving us this opportunity. It's so fantastic to be in community with you all tonight, even if it is virtually. As an educator, as a rising policy professional, I spend my days thinking about and working towards solutions to some of the most fundamental challenges that we face in public education. And I work with a really talented group of fantastic professionals. Every election is important, but for those of us who kind of exist in this educational world, we've known for some time that our public education system has been on the precipice of some pretty major changes. COVID exacerbated this. It made it happen much more quickly. These are not unforeseen challenges. While countless school board directors have served and currently do serve our district exceptionally well as leaders in other professions, I would assert that given the magnitude of the changes, given the challenges that we're facing, it's going to be incredibly useful to have someone with classroom experience, with federal policy level experience to sit on this board as we, again, decide these really pivotal next 4 years. So asked to boil down the challenges that our school is facing, I would boil it down to 2. And I would argue first, a lack of transparency and communication, and second, not enough regulatory oversight of the administration. There is a serious and real disconnect between the community, the board, and the district. And our schools are only as strong as our support of them and our confidence in them. If this is not corrected, we face a serious risk of snowballing towards even greater deficits, towards lower enrollment. And second, again, thinking about regulatory oversight of the administration, I think that we really need to push them more on answering questions that we have, on working to dialogue with us a bit more effectively. So thank you.
Thank you, candidate Aker. Candidate Lurie, you will now have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Deborah Lurie, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters and PTA Council for hosting us here tonight. I've had the privilege of serving on our school board for the past 4 years. It's been an interesting term, and we've accomplished a lot, including updating our values, vision, and mission, creating board resolutions for gun safety prevention, and a commitment to sustainability. We've created a facilities master plan and will soon be working on a sustainable transportation plan. As Mercer Islanders, despite all of our different views, we have one thing in common. We love our children fiercely and want the best for them. I know that our teachers and staff feel the same way. They demonstrate this to us day in and day out. While resources and services might be finite, passion and commitment to our young people is not. We need to come together to make decisions that best serve each one of our students. I'm a lifelong member of the Mercer Island community. I grew up here and attended Mercer Island Public Schools, kindergarten through the graduating class of 1990. I earned my bachelor's degree in business administration at Franklin and Marshall College and my law degree from American University. I returned to the Seattle area to start my career as a public defender and continue with that work today. In 2011, my husband Brian and I decided to make Mercer Island our home so that our daughter Joey could benefit from the same exceptional education I did. She is now in 10th grade. As a public defender, I've spent over 20 years advocating for children, parents, and families in the areas of criminal law, at-risk youth, truancy, child welfare, special education, and mental health. My top 2 pressing issues facing the district this time are the mental health of students and hiring a superintendent who will make decisions with students as the priority. I will bring this advocacy experience to continue to advocate for each student in the Mercer Island School District. I am the right person to bring stability to the district in this time of transition and ask for your continued support.
Thank you for your opening statements. Candidates will now move to the question portion of our forum. For the first question, each of you will have 30 seconds to respond, and candidate Lurie, you will be answering first. Question 1. The current superintendent is retiring at the end of this school year. What qualities would you like to see in a new superintendent? Candidate Lurie, you'll have 30 seconds to respond.
Thank you. I think that choosing the next superintendent is one of the most vital and important responsibilities to the school board. It is our one employee who we supervise and believe that they should follow the priorities as set by the district. We need someone who communicates well, is the lead learner, and ultimately has the respect of students, parents, and our community and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Lurie. Candidate Aker, you now have 30 seconds to respond.
So I do definitely applaud the district for beginning the discussion on thought exchange. Thinking about the important qualities for superintendent, I would lean really heavily on what the community is saying. And they have said quite a lot on thought exchange. Top qualities that they are looking at: transparency, communication, excellence. And so I think as a school board director, it's really about asking the questions of potential candidates. For example, how have they shown transparency in the past? How do they demonstrate excellence? How have they done that in the past?
Thank you, Candidate Aker. Candidate Glowitz, you will now have 30 seconds to respond.
Thank you. When looking at the next superintendent, I think we should look at a candidate who has come from a district that faces many of the same challenges we do. A high-performing district with high academic standards, one that knows how to interact with a well-educated and informed community, and is responsive to a community that's used to data and wants to see it in real time and values accountability. Also, I would urge the district to consider some form of the Rooney Rule when it comes to diversity and equity in their candidate selection.
Thank you, Candidate Glowitz. Candidate Giannini Upton, you now have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Through the pandemic, for the past year and a half, I've began looking at our system as kind of a seesaw. Two things that are really important. One is that we have students who are engaged and want to be a part of our system. That then triggers the apportionment, which then allows us to hire staff. So we need a lead learner who's able to engage with families and students, who's going to be able to build consensus and community, and is going to be able to make our staff feel safe and protected and supported as we learn together and build a brighter future.
Thank you, candidates. We'll now move on to question 2. For question 2, each of you will have 1 minute to respond. And candidate Glowitz, you will begin. Question 2, how do you think the school board should deal with the anticipated budget deficit created by decreased school enrollment? Candidate Glowitz, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. My background is as an attorney, and for my first years practicing law, it was financial insolvency on Wall Street. So I feel well prepared for, in a small scale, some of the challenges that we face. One of the things that I learned in financial restructuring is there's many different stakeholders, and you need to get all the stakeholders into the room with the opportunity to present their view of what a plan of reorganization should look like. I think similarly, when we're confronting our own financial distress, we need to get all the stakeholders in the room, the teachers union, the administration, parents, and have proposals of what different scenarios look like and what the trade-offs are. We need to confront it in a clear-eyed and honest fashion. It's going to be significant. We can do it, but only if it's transparent and we involve the community.
Thank you, candidate Glowitz. Candidate Giannini Upton, you now have 1 minute for question 2.
I would say if there's one constant in public education, it's that public education is always changing. Our professionals in the administration, our chief financial officer, our superintendents, our lead administrators, as well as our principals, cabinets at our school levels and facility levels, and our teachers are all well aware of what it takes to shift and change in an ever-changing landscape of education. Policies change, budgets change, there's always an ebb and flow. This has been magnified by a pandemic, and what has happened to us has happened suddenly. but there are still policies and changes in play. The state legislature is still talking about stabilization. There are still federal grants and funds that are available to us. So we have to continue to plan for that, apply for budgets, and we have to make sure that we contract our district in a way that suits the needs of our students first and foremost. Our students need to be centered in every decision we make, and we need to make sure that we're meeting their needs.
Thank you, candidate Giannini Upton. Candidate Lurie, same question, and you have 1 minute.
Thank you. 85% of our school budget is people, our many teachers and staff who support our students every day. We need to continue to advocate to our legislators for enrollment stabilization as we work towards as we work ourselves out of the pandemic. Ultimately, we're going to need to increase enrollment or reduce staff or a combination of the two. It's frankly that simple. We have to right size our district, whether to match our prototypical school model with which is the funding that we receive from the state. We have our levies that adds to it, but we're restricted in how much levy dollars we can get as well. So first and foremost, we are pushing for enrollment stabilization so that we have time to make the decisions that we need to.
Thank you, candidate Lurie. Candidate Aker, you will now have 1 minute for the same question.
I think one of the most important parts to consider in thinking about this pretty significant budget deficit is being really honest and really upfront with the community. The more that we are transparent with them, I think the better this painful process is going to be. Thinking about building that confidence is going to be so important to this. I would agree advocating at the state level is incredibly important. But I think also thinking ahead here about what we want future budgets to look like, what we've learned from it, and really coming back to the community to say, this is what we've learned. We've fixed these mistakes. This is how we are going to do better in the future is going to be really critical to building that goodwill for these probably painful budget cuts.
Thank you, candidates. We'll now move on to question 3. Each of you will have 1 minute to respond to question number 3, and we will be beginning with candidate Aker. Question 3. Given the experiences of last year, would you change the way the district interacts and communicates with parents going forward? If so, what changes would you suggest? And candidate Aker, you have 1 minute.
I would certainly advocate for changing how the district communicates with parents. The one thing that you learn in public policy, kind of like 101, is there's no way to under communicate during a crisis. I think that is what happened during COVID. So communicating with parents more, communicating with community members more, I don't think there's a wrong way to do that. I don't think that it needs to be a sophisticated tech-heavy solution either. Thinking about having an FAQ on the website could be incredibly useful. Parents and community members are probably going to have overlapping questions. So having one centralized location for that, I think makes a lot of sense. It's low tech, it's low budget, it's common sense. I would love to see that. Additionally, thinking as a candidate, things like office hours would be incredibly useful and relatively easy to pull off.
Thank you, candidate Aker. Candidate Lurie, you now have 1 minute.
Thank you. Communication with our community has been something that the board has been struggling with, frankly, before the pandemic hit. And it has been exacerbated because of the issues involved with the pandemic. We need to continue to seek out feedback about what works for everyone. And I like to liken it as universal design for learning. We know that our students have different needs. Our parents have different needs as well. And what we need to do is make sure that it's not a one size fits all, that we have a website that people can look to, that we have, make sure we reduce language barriers, make sure that we have social media posts for people who don't have as much time but want to know what's going on. We have, the board receives emails and reviews each one of them, and we have public input. So there are lots of ways that the board can communicate and is open to hearing any other suggestions.
Thank you, candidate Lurie. Candidate Giannini Upton, you have 1 minute.
So the communication over the last year and a half has been extremely challenging. Oftentimes we would get a report from public health or something from the state superintendent, and we knew that that information could change within 24 to 48 hours. In fact, we often expected that there would be updates to that information. So it was really difficult to remain agile and on our toes while navigating that. Also, our administration and the way that they communicate is very different than how the board communicates. The board meets twice a month, sometimes with special meetings. The president speaks on behalf of the board, but of course you can always reach out to a board member at any time. We're happy to answer questions, meet for coffee, and we read every letter and communication that comes to us. I think continuing to have conversations with the community, more in casual settings as opposed to formal settings, can help to build trust and to get a sense that we really can approach each other and have conversations about what's important.
Thank you, candidate Giannini Upton. Candidate Glowitz, you now have 1 minute.
Yeah, when Shackleton was on the Endurance, the original mission was exploration, and it became one of survival when it became icebound. Likewise, at times, districts need to pivot when confronting a crisis, and in this case, a pandemic. The district didn't. Brian just said that it's difficult managing when you're liaisoning with public health, which is another way of saying looking to public health for direction and for guidance rather than individual initiative. That's what was lacking in the school district. I don't believe the superintendent sent an email out to parents until 13 days after schools first shuttered. There was a lack of questions by my opponent and the first board meetings following the schools being shuttered. Anyone can fly a plane on autopilot when the skies are calm. Sometimes you have to take the controls in a storm.
Thank you, candidates. We'll now move on to question 4. For question 4, you'll each have 1 minute, and we'll begin answers with candidate Giannini Upton. Question 4, what is the Mercer Island School District doing well, and what is it doing poorly in terms of how it teaches about the role of justice, race, and diversity in our history and currently? Candidate Giannini Upton, you have 1 minute.
That is an awesome question, and I'm really glad you asked for it. I think just as with a lot of public education, there's scrutiny happening right now about how we teach history, how we teach justice, how we teach current events and our place in the world. I think the district has worked really hard over the past 4 years in shifting its focus to the whole child, to shift also to the concept of the civic-minded graduate. This is a graduate, a student who comes out of our education with critical, analytical, and creative thinking, but also understands how their decisions and the work they do impacts the world around them, locally, regionally, and globally. So we need to continue to work to tell authentic stories from multiple perspectives, that we don't lean into dominant culture or supremacy culture when we map our stories, when we look at global problems. I think we all have a lot of work to do in cultural competency and building those skills.
Thank you, candidate Giannini Upton. Candidate Glowitz, you now have 1 minute for the same question.
People are complex, and we live in a complex world with a complex history. And I think that complexity should be taught, but it should be taught deeply and moving beyond slogans and buzzwords. I went to college at Amherst College, which is a more unusual choice, a liberal arts school on the East Coast for someone who attended school here. And the reason I did that is it had one of the highest rates of international students that attended there. I was 10% when I chose it. In a small student body where I knew I would be exposed to a range of different views and viewpoints and backgrounds. And that turned out to be the case. It's where I met my wife, who was a foreign student from Romania. Interestingly, the enrollment of Mercer Island High School is similar, and I think is similarly diverse with people from many different backgrounds. And I think we have an incredible opportunity here if we do it intelligently. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Glowitz. Candidate Aker, you now have 1 minute.
As someone who has taught world history, as someone who's taught US history, civics, AP world history, who received a degree in social studies pedagogy, this is a really complex topic. And I think to reduce it to small sound bites does a pretty grave disservice. We're complex, certainly. When we think about our social studies curriculum, we're really talking about a core of critical thinking, of giving students as many different viewpoints as possible, and not telling them what viewpoints to look at, but really telling them and helping them along the way figure out where the biases are, because inherently everything that people make is biased because people make it. And so thinking about race and social justice, it's so important that we consider all of the different avenues that we have to teach about it, to learn about it, and ultimately to send out into the world folks who are able to interact with one another.
Thank you, candidate Aker. Candidate Lurie, you now have 1 minute for the same question.
Thank you. We are raising and educating the future leaders of the world. I think our district's done an amazing job in the last several years of allowing students to lead and advocate for their education. Students created social justice courses, both at the middle school and the high school. Students created our social justice clubs in response to what's happening in the world around them. And the staff at each of those schools supports the students in that endeavor. We must continue to follow our students' lead because the future is theirs. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We'll now move on to question 5. For question 5, you'll have 30 seconds each, and we'll begin with candidate Lurie. Question 5, what is your understanding of grading for equity, and how would it impact Mercer Island students? What do you see as the advantages and disadvantages to this type of grading? Candidate Lurie, you have 30 seconds.
There's no way I can answer that in 30 seconds. It is complex. I'm going to do my best. What grading for equity means is it's standards-based grading. There are specific standards under our Common Core that teachers are required to teach so that students can advance. Standards-based grading is making sure that our students are meeting those basic standards. It doesn't mean that we stop there. We keep going. But that's what standards-based grading is all about. It removes high-stakes testing. Students can prove that they understand the standard at any point in time.
Thank you, candidate Lurie. Candidate Aker, 30 seconds.
Yeah, grading is incredibly complex. Someone who's graded thousands and thousands, I think at this point, of papers, I can attest to that. And there's no perfect way to grade because it is both subjective and objective at the same time. But I think more broadly speaking, the community itself would really appreciate kind of a crash course in equity grading. I agree, 30 seconds is very brief, but kind of, again, bringing the community in to see and to show what equity grading is, what it isn't, its strengths and its weaknesses is incredibly important when we think about the grades that we are assigning and the standards we're thinking about.
Thank you, candidate Aker. Candidate Glowitz, 30 seconds.
Grading for equity is good in theory. I think whether it's good in practice depends, like most things. In terms of the idea that students should be assessed based on their competence at the end of the unit, I think is beneficial. However, I think there's some dangers of how it's implemented, that it's not based upon effort, but is based on more objective criteria. And I did listen to the video that the middle school put out, and I thought there was a lot of questions. So I think the district needs to do a better job to communicate.
Thank you, candidate Glowitz. Candidate Giannini Upton, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. In a nutshell, grading for equity involves a scale of 1 to 4. 1 is a novice learner. You've just entered into studying something. 2 is approaching the standards that's been set out. 3 is hitting that standard square on, and 4 is overshooting that standard and really delving into deep learning. We want all of our students to achieve a 4 and go really deep, but a 3, that really means you've demonstrated mastery of that skill. And that's what it's about. We want students who can have mastery of skills, not just being able to regurgitate data.
Thank you, candidates. It seems like we just began, but it is now, in fact, time for our closing statements. You will each have 30 seconds for your closing statements, and we'll begin with candidate Glowitz.
Challenging circumstances requires courage and leadership, someone who can work collaboratively while asking hard questions and demanding accountability through transparency and concrete criteria. My background as an attorney with a focus on corporate governance and restructuring has prepared me for that task. I ask for your vote for the school board this November. Together we can plan for a better today and a brighter tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Glowitz. Candidate Giannini Upton, you have 30 seconds for your closing.
Thank you. For well over a decade, I've been advocating for vulnerable children, children who've experienced trauma, abuse, violence. I myself was a child that experienced a lot of trauma and found school really challenging. There's no doubt I would have been lost through the cracks in a pandemic. I will be advocating for vulnerable children, whether I continue on with the board or continue on as a community volunteer. This is what I do. This is central to my why, and I want to ensure that every child has the supports and resources they need to succeed.
Thank you, candidate Giannini Upton. Candidate Lurie, you now have 30 seconds for your closing statement.
My passion is advocating for kids, and Mercer Island is my lifelong home. I want to continue serving on the board to continue the work the district has been doing to make our students the priority. We have made great strides, and we have much more work to do.
Thank you, candidate Lurie. Candidate Aker, you have 30 seconds for your closing statement.
Our challenges are clearly immense. There's no silver bullet here, right? There's no panacea. If I had that, I would offer it and we do it immediately. There's simply us, right? There's us as a community working together, deciding purposefully to listen to one another and to be guided by a fervent support for our students, for our staff, for the children, right, that call Mercer Island home. And I think as a policy professional with experience in the classroom, with experience with the U.S. Department of Education, I would be well qualified to help guide this district in these next pivotal years.
I want to thank all of the school board candidates for their participation tonight in this forum. We'll now be moving on to questions for candidates for Mercer's Island City Council. It might take us a few minutes to get those candidates up on the screen and to say good night and thank you to our school board candidates.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have all of our school board candidates up now on the screen. Do we have, oh wait, maybe not. We'll wait a few more minutes here. I see five, there we go. Okay, I think we have now all of our city council candidates on the screen. So we will move on to questions directed to candidates for Mercer Island City Council. Those candidates are Daniel Becker and Salim Neese for position 2, Michael Curry and Ted Weinberg for position 4, and Kate Accuse and Lisa Anderl for position 6. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Candidates, in your opening statement, please include why you are running for City Council and what your top 2 priorities will be if elected. Candidate Becker, you will begin and you have 2 minutes.
First, thank you to the hosts for having us here. Also, thanks to my husband for watching our 2-year-old. Tonight's actually his birthday. This probably isn't how he wanted to spend it, but our whole family is in this together. I've spent the last 20 years building a company from scratch, now with 170 employees and almost 50 million in sales this year. If you don't know, City Council is part-time, pays $200 a month, so I will not be leaving my day job. I'm running for City Council not as a stepping stone, but because I care about my hometown, our future, and helping our city become an even better place to live. I've talked a lot recently with residents about being nicer. If we acted in real life like the interactions on Nextdoor, none of us would want to live here. I am committed to raising the bar for our standards of ethics, integrity, and respect. And I'm committed to leading by example so we don't lose any more city staff due to the culture on City Council, and instead retain the best employees to provide the best services that our residents expect and deserve. In terms of top priorities, I'll preface it by saying that public safety is the city's paramount duty. If residents don't feel safe, nothing else matters. I consider this part of the city's baseline performance that should be a focus for everyone and is separate from my priorities. One thing I want is a more vibrant town center. We need to update our town center plan from 2016 to coalesce on an actual vision for the future. It needs to be easy to park, but then pleasant to walk around. We need a better ratio of restaurants and shops. I love the outdoor area at Barrels and Sano Cafe, and we need more spaces like that for the community to gather. I see this as a major opportunity for improvement. Another priority is around climate change. The city will finally, after years of delay, create a climate action plan, which is our city's action items for how to be leaders and do our part. We cannot let this plan get watered down or be something that sits on a shelf. I am the youngest person running for council with the youngest kid, which is why I'm so future focused. We needed action on this topic a decade ago, but I will have to settle with change starting on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Becker. Candidate Neese, you will now have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Good evening. And before I respond, let me first thank the League of Women Voters and the Mercer Island PTA Legislative Committee for organizing tonight's event and for everyone at home that tuned in to participate tonight. My name is Salim Neese, and I'm one of your current City Council members. I've served on the City Council since 2017 as both a council member and deputy mayor. During my time on the council, I have led with ethics and transparency in government. I make decisions by listening to the data, subject matter experts, and most importantly, my constituents' views and values. I have served on several regional boards and commissions, including the King County Flood Board and the Growth Management Planning Council, and locally, our Sustainability Committee, Finance Committee, Mercer Island Youth and Family Services Subcommittee, and Arts Council. I am the assigned representative to the Renton Airport Advisory Council. My role is to advocate to the reduced expansions of flight operations and noise impacts to Mercer Island. I drafted the city's first financial management policies, which serve as a blueprint to the city staff to achieve goals outlined in the budget work plans, the comprehensive plan, and other planning documents. Lastly, I have brought forward or supported legislation that provided additional tools to our police officers to increase officer safety and improve public safety. These include ALPR technology updates, expansions to our Safe Parks and Streets ordinance, early funding of patrol officers to increase diversity within the department, and a capital project to convert the former Telly's Coffee site to a town center police precinct next year. My priorities are public safety and town center retail vibrancy and anything that we can do to support the post-COVID pandemic relief for our local merchants. I am proud of the work that I've accomplished on City Council, and I'm seeking re-election this fall to continue representing Islanders' interests.
Thank you, candidate Neese. Candidate Curry, you now have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you very much. First off, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and all those who are participating, including my opponent, Ted Weinberg. Hi, I'm Michael Curry, and I'm running for City Council Seat 4. I have 30+ years of experience leading and mentoring teams in high and low stress environments centered around delivering well thought out solutions. My wife, a Mercer Island native, class of '87, and I recognized that we wanted a small community that placed a strong emphasis on diversity and inclusion. When we visited Mercer Island, I knew this was a community where we would be welcomed and could raise our family successfully. We were both fortunate enough to have lived in cities across the US and the world, which highlighted for us just how special and unique Mercer Island is as a home and a destination. Upon the fulfillment of our military and collegiate commitments, we decided to make Mercer Island our home. Running for City Council is a call to action. I've had 3 others in my life: the military as part of the 82nd Airborne Division, youth coach, and professional coach. In my career in life, I've been privileged to interact with truly awesome people, kids included. They've taught me to stay humble, practice humility, and laugh often. My focus is Mercer Island and the great people on it. I will work with the council and city management to ensure that regional politics are minimized. As such, I've not accepted off-island endorsements or donations. My priorities are public safety, supporting first response teams, fiscal responsibility, transportation advocacy, putting Mercer Island first, and preservation of our unique and beautiful park system. I'll work to maintain the quality of life that brings great people to the island, and will work to rebuild trust between the citizens of Mercer Island and the council through transparency and open communication. I feel that differing opinions are healthy and can drive growth and innovation when properly discussed. If there is a difference of opinion, let's figure out where we do align. I hope to earn your vote in November. Thank you, and vote Curry.
Thank you, candidate Curry. Candidate Weinberg, you now have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Ms. Conrad, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and the PTA for hosting this candidates forum. And thank you to the voters who are watching this session, either live or via the recording, for taking the time to learn more about the candidates that are running for City Council. My name is Ted Weinberg, and I'm running for City Council seat number 4, leveraging 30 years of experience in both the public and private sectors. I have a passion for listening to the community members and crafting effective solutions. As your City Council member, I will prioritize maintaining local control of our public safety, including our ensuring that our first responders have the resources that they need. I'll also protect and expand our parks, work with our neighboring cities to address homelessness, and strengthen our business community. I'm a 40-year Islander myself, class of '86. I have had the honor to serve on the Planning Commission since 2017, working through complex issues, including the Comprehensive Plan, Shoreline Master Plan, and the Critical Areas Ordinance. In my day job, I'm the IT portfolio manager for the city of Seattle. So I collaborate with leadership from each of the 34 city departments to select, fund, and prioritize the strategic technology initiatives that deliver both innovation and greater efficiency. I will serve our community with integrity, compassion, and dedication. And I am endorsed by all 3 of our legislators, Wellman, Sen, and Tai, the council members Wong, Weicker, Reynolds, and Rosenbaum, the entire Mercer Island School Board, Lurie D'Souza, Tucker, Din, and Janini Upton, 3 former mayors, Bertlin, Merkel, Cliburn, Newman, and the MI Firefighters Association. Again, my name is Ted Weinberg, and I humbly ask for your vote, and when you get your ballot later this week.
Thank you, candidate Weinberg. Candidate Hughes, you now have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. And thank you so much to the League of Women Voters and PTA and everyone who showed up tonight. I know people have other things to do, so it's great that you came to listen to all of us. So I am an environmental scientist and a capital project manager. I've got 24 years of experience working with nonprofits and government agencies, and all of that is devoted to the environment, making sure that our children, our generation and our children's generations have healthy park spaces, open spaces that are accessible to everyone, and making sure that those are well maintained and preserved for the future. I'm running for city council for a lot of reasons. First off, I think civility has gone out the window. If anyone's been on Nextdoor in the last 2 weeks, you've seen that my opponent's supporters have unleashed some very vicious attacks on me, stating things that are not true. I see this at city council meetings all the time. I see people raising their voices and not talking in a civil manner, both on the council and in the audience. And I think we are so much better than that. When I go door to door and talk to people, they are friendly, they are nice, they are kind, they are givers. We are a giving community, an ambitious community, and we can do better. That's why I'm running. My top 2 priorities would be getting Mercer Island Youth and Family Services fully funded and making sure that they have a long-term reserve. The Foundation for Mercer Island Youth and Family Services has been extremely responsible, and they saved our bacon in the pandemic. We got counselors cut off from our kids and our seniors at a time when they absolutely needed it most. And I don't think that was a good choice. I would also support a Parks Conservancy. I've done a lot of grant writing and helped form the Green Seattle Partnership. And I think I could work well with Councilmember Jacobson, who I know is interested in that as well. And I would look forward to forming that with the city. Thanks so much. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, candidate accused. Candidate Andrew, you now have 2 minutes for your opening.
Okay, hi. Thank you everybody for being here. And thank you to the League of Women Voters and the PTA for hosting tonight. I appreciate everyone's interest in this election, which is a very important election. My name is Lisa Anderl. I'm currently on the City Council. I have been for the past 3 years. I'm running for re-election to continue what I think is the very good work we started in 2018. It has been my honor and privilege to serve on the council since then. During that time, I have voted hundreds of times on hundreds of issues. You know what you get with me because you can look at my voting record. I have consistently voted in a way that I believe furthers the best interests of our community. I have taken leadership positions on public safety issues, on transportation issues, on zoning issues, and on fiscal sustainability, working with our very awesome city manager to bring the city into a balanced budget without tax increases and continued delivery of quality services. I voted in favor of protecting our parks and open spaces. I voted in favor of funding our public safety services, including the police and fire departments. I voted to fund the school counselors. I've supported innovations and efficiencies in how the city delivers services. These are the priorities that I've heard from the community, and they are mine as well. In addition, I believe it's critically important that we preserve our single-family neighborhoods. This is something else I hear as I go door to door in those single-family neighborhoods. I think we have a great mix of housing on the island right now, and I would like to keep Mercer Island as good as it is and work to make it better. I also fully supported and will continue to support significant improvements to our critical infrastructure, including our water and sewer systems. And I worked collaboratively with my colleagues to get a quick restart on Parks and Rec. Not only do I bring all of this experience to council, I bring 35 years as an attorney to the council with significant experience negotiating contracts and complex settlement agreements and preparing and supporting reasoned positions on issues. I humbly ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for your opening statements. We'll now move on to questions for the evening. For our first question, you will each have 1 minute to respond, and candidate Andrew will lead the responses. Question 1. Our region and the city have a goal to cut carbon emissions in half by 2030. What can the city and the residents do to ensure we meet that challenge and encourage sustainability? Candidate Andrew, you have 1 minute.
Well, thank you. I think the city has taken great strides toward that by hiring a full-time sustainability manager. I know that sustainability is now, and including carbon emissions, is now an integral component woven into procurement contracts and all types of financial decisions that the city makes. I think the city can do more to partner with some of our local utilities to perhaps reinstate encouragement for a solar program. I believe that the city can and will make additional procurement decisions, including vehicle purchases and other capital and expense items that have a component of sustainability and, in fact, carbon emissions woven into it. In addition, a vibrant town center, which I will work hard to promote, will reduce off-island trips, which is also a component of reducing carbon emissions.
Thank you, Candidate Andrell. Candidate Accused, you have 1 minute for the same question.
Thank you so much. Obviously, given that I've worked to restore the environment for 24 years, this is a very important issue to me. There's some bumper stickers that have been around since the 70s that say trees are the answer. And I firmly believe that we need more trees. We need more trees at home. We need more trees in our parks, and we need more parks to put more trees in. I would love to create a Parks Conservancy so that we can sequester carbon locally and get those degrading forests going. I think that we also need to look at solar. It's very hard to get permits these days. It took us 6 months to get a permit for a tiny solar panel. That's not acceptable. We need to have staff adequate that we can implement some of these ideas. I also think we need to really seriously look at the e-bike revolution. Our city's been a little bit hostile to bike transportation, and I would like to see some e-bike infrastructure put in to help out with that last mile chunk. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Accused. Candidate Weinberg, you have 1 minute.
I need to unmute first. To meet our 2030 goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 50%, we need to encourage, measure, and where feasible, legislate the reduction of our community's carbon footprint. We need to phase out fossil fuels for renewables in both for both heating our homes and also for powering our cars and for mass transit. We need to reduce our miles driven. We need to increase our tree canopy over time and maintain and expand our parks and open space. We can do it, and we are going to do it. It's crucial for this generation to be able to hand over to the next generation a world that is green and that is vibrant.
Thank you, Candidate Weinberg. Candidate Curry, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. It's essential to ensure our council's thoughts and the citizens' ideas and voices on Mercer Island are captured and considered when deciding on any planning for carbon reduction. I support working with our local K4C and other local municipalities to share ideas and best practices on how we can do that effectively. I don't necessarily think it's strictly a Mercer Island thing. I think that working with other local governmental agencies as well around the region can bring better ideas. We also need to ensure we have active participation and feedback loops. Once we have our plan in place, we should be able to revisit it frequently and take feedback from our constituencies on a Mercer Island and make sure that their thoughts and ideas are included as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Curry. Candidate Neese, you now have 1 minute.
Thank you. The goals of meeting the climate action plan, the 50% reduction, need to be incorporated into the climate action plan. We've done a lot on Mercer Island in measuring carbon emissions. We've looked at city emissions. We've made the city operations basically 100% sustainable. The 98% of the emissions that are on Mercer Island are those related to the residents of Mercer Island. We need to find ways to reduce the carbon footprint of our homes, of our vehicle transportation systems, and the way we move around. I think making a climate action plan now is the first step and the most critical step in making those 50% reductions. We've done a lot of distributed programs. We have a lot of incentives. We've solarized Mercer Island. We've worked with our our electric providers, PSE, to try and create incentives. What we haven't done is come together as a community and said, these are the ideals that we hold. This is what we're going to measure. We're going to encapsulate it with a climate action plan that we all believe in and get behind. And then we're going to start making real change. And that's going to start with improvements in our residential design standards, how we build. And
Candidate Neese, your time has stopped.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Candidate Neese. Candidate Becker, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. As I stated earlier, this is an incredibly important topic, and frankly, we need to be leaders on this. The climate action plan that was just mentioned has been the intention of our city to create for almost 10 years. Other cities have already done this, and we are behind. The point of the climate action plan is to outline the goals of specific steps that we can take to reduce emissions. We will have experts that will come in and will actually create guidance for what we can and should be doing. I don't necessarily want to jump ahead of the climate action plan because that's what should be creating the guidance. But as has been stated, the two main emissions in the city are heating and transportation. We need to work to eliminate gas heating in commercial properties, which is allowed. We need to be facilitating electric vehicles. Public transportation is important, but most people are going to continue driving. And the way that we're going to eliminate emissions with transportation is facilitating electric vehicles and on-island retail. And if you haven't signed up for PSC Green Power, you should Google it and you should do that.
Thank you, candidates, for your responses. We will now move on to question 2. For question 2, you will each have 1 minute to respond. And we will begin the responses with candidate Curry. Question 2. The city is currently updating the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, otherwise known as PROS or PROS. Do you feel the city adequately maintains its parks for all users? What problems do you see and what improvements are needed? Are maintenance and improvements adequately funded? Candidate Curry, you have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you. I feel that any plan that currently exists can get better. Also knowing that we're just coming out of, or we're starting to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic on a limited basis. I know I appreciate seeing our parks and recreation teams here at Homestead Field doing the best that they can. It's just a lot of ground to cover. Regarding structures and infrastructure that's in place, I would be for reviewing any plans that we might have currently drafted or helping to draft new plans on how those structures might be updated, any maintenance planning, budgeting, and so on and so forth. But yes, thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Curry. Candidate Weinberg, you now have 1 minute.
So our Parks and Recreation Department has suffered a 1-2 knockout punch over the last 3 years. First, Prop 1 failed, necessitating some painful cutbacks in non-essential programs, and parks was among them, as well as recreation. Then COVID hit, requiring essentially the complete shutdown of our recreational programs. And what remained of our Parks Department was moved under the Public Works Department. At one point, the number of people that were available to maintain our parks was so low that the city could not keep up with emptying the garbage cans. And so a lot of them were just taken away. As we emerged from the pandemic and we realized that the city revenues did not crater as badly as we thought they were going to, we need to staff back up and start and restart our recreational programs. And that's going to involve a lot of rehiring. A lot of other cities repurposed their staff, their recreational staff, rather than letting them go. But since we let them go, it's going to take us a while. We need to rehire them back, but we have the funds to do it.
Thank you, Candidate Weinberg. Candidate Accused, you now have 1 minute.
Thank you so much. My short answer is no, our parks maintenance is not adequately funded. We have 300 acres of open space and 1 3/4 time position to manage that. And that person just left for a better paying job. We've had many, many cuts to our budget and a big resistance to really getting us to the level of funding we need to adequately maintain our parks. What this is doing is just stacking up a whole bunch of deferred maintenance for the next generation. It's not fair. It's not sustainable. My opponent was the only council member to do a thumbs down vote to put the sustainability manager in the city budget. I would not have made that vote. I would like to see us get an AmeriCorps program going for the Parks Department so that we can have those positions available for local kids to help work in parks, reduce herbicide use. And I'd like to see more than a 3/4 time staff for 300 acres. That's totally inadequate. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate accused. Candidate Andrill, you now have 1 minute.
Thank you. No, I think that we would always like more money for our parks, but sorry, I'm not getting the video feed. All right, in any event, I think we're getting feedback from our residents through the PROS plan that say that they like the parks largely the way they are. They'd like some more connecting trails. But you know, one of the things we learned during COVID was that if we let our parks get a little woollier, didn't water as much, didn't mow as much, people still loved the parks. And we've been able to gather a lot of efficiencies by combining the Parks and Rec staff in with the Public Works Department. I think that was a smart move. I would continue to support it. Dividing those staffs is wasteful and duplicative. Would we like more funding? Yes. Would I advocate to renew the parks levy in when it expires next year or 2023? Yes. But I think overall, the city does a wonderful job maintaining and preserving our parks for the enjoyment of our residents and our visitors.
Thank you, candidate Andrill. I'm not sure what's happening technically on your side. I just wanted to reassure you that you can be both seen and heard on the screen.
Okay, just so you know that all I saw was candidate accused in the video screen.
Candidate Becker, you now have 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. I am very excited to see the results of the PROS plan. I think it's incredibly important for us to be doing so much outreach to residents to learn what they want. I can say that from the residents I've spoken with, they are not happy with the status of the parks during the pandemic. I think that the parks are one of the big reasons of why we all moved to Mercer Island. And it was sad to see the lack of maintenance over the course of the last year. And it was a bummer having the recreational programs that have gotten canceled. I think that we absolutely need to figure out how we can better maintain the parks, increase the recreational programs. It probably needs additional funding because that's one of the key things that makes Mercer Island great. And in general, my philosophy is there's always room for improvement. We can always make things better, and that applies as well to the parks.
Thank you, candidate Becker. Candidate Neese, you now have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you. I think we're tremendously blessed in Mercer Island with the park system at 400 plus acres of parks and open spaces. We, in terms of looking at parks in Mercer Island, need to understand that we're a growing population. We're an island of more than 26,000 residents living in all forms of housing, and our park acres are not growing. We need to get back to the position where we're looking at park acres per thousand, and we're keeping pace with the cities around us. Other cities are adding to their park system. I actually supported and proposed an idea to purchase a residential property at the corner of Island Crest Way and 40th to add a public plaza and expand our park system ever so slightly. It doesn't feel like a lot, but this is along a critical route to school. It's an area that we saw intense interest through the pandemic, where people were able to express their opinions in a busy intersection. These types of investments need to continue, along with the investments that we're making with things like Luther Burbank Docks that we're going through an extensive process of updating. We can't do it all at one time, and we have to be measured just like we replace our infrastructure with our parks equipment. The other aspect of this is—
I'm sorry, candidate Neese, your time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for your responses. We'll now move on to question 3. For question 3, you'll each have 1 minute. And for question 3, we will begin with candidate Neese. Question 3. There appears to be increasing concern about crime on the island, ranging from car prowls and theft to harassment and vandalism. As a council member, how would you address this issue? Candidate Neese, you have 1 minute.
First, I think that it's important to understand that our Mercer Island Police Department is doing the best work that they can. Recent legislation at the state legislature has changed the nature of policing and has done it dramatically and quickly and with very little police input. We are adapting and trying to find ways to work within the state legislation, but it's a real challenge. I want everybody to know that the Mercer Island Police Department is doing the best work that they can, given the constraints that they have. I will make it a priority, if reelected to City Council, to create legislative priorities for our Mercer Island City Council to go back to our state legislature with all of the concerns from our Mercer Island Police Department so that we can lobby to improve them, respect the original intent, but make sure that policing is safe for the police, the community, and it's effective.
Thank you, Candidate Neese. Candidate Becker, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. As I stated earlier, public safety is the city's paramount duty. And if residents don't feel safe, nothing else matters. When I'm speaking with residents, there's definitely a concern about incidents that have been happening recently. There's definitely a perception that crime has increased. There's certainly concern because of the law that was recently passed, and I agree that there are a significant number of improvements that we could be making, and I would like to prioritize as well, going back to our legislators to have them look and see what we need to do in order to ensure that our residents feel safe. It does feel rushed. I have met with the police chief, and I've talked to him about the priorities in the city, and I think that we would need to work together to figure out what those asks are for all of our legislators in terms of fixes to the law and how we can ensure that our residents feel safe.
Thank you, Candidate Becker. Candidate Weinberg, you now have 1 minute.
So public safety needs to be managed using reason and using data and using the big picture. So let me share some of the big picture and some of the data. In December and January of this past year, there was a significant uptick in larceny on the islands, particularly in car prowls. After a brief respite in February, it then spiked again in March and stayed elevated from March through May. Larceny counts on Mercer Island were between 50 and 100% higher than the corresponding months in prior years. So our police chief, Ed Holmes, and his staff examined the patterns in the data, considered their options for addressing this trend, and decided to up their patrols. What was the result? So in June, July, and August, larceny counts dropped 60% below the average that they were from March through May. And they were 10 to 30% below the counts for the same months in prior years. So it not only got rid of the spike that we had, but it helped get it below where it was originally. Crime didn't drop to zero, but the police's actions were very remarkably effective. We should continue doing that.
Thank you, Candidate Weinberg. Candidate Curry, you now have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. One of my priorities amongst the several that I've listed earlier is public safety. How do we do that? Council should lead the way. We should work with not only our police force, we should work with our citizens, and we should work with our state legislators to make sure that any laws that are enacted create safe laws and actions for our citizens through our police force. We should not put our police force at risk, which then puts our citizens at risk. We should make sure that we should be making sure that our budgeting, if necessary, would reflect taking care of our police force. Specifically, when Sound Transit comes online in 2023, we should be engaged and looking at that plan already as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Curry. Candidate Anderl, you now have 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. What would I do as a council person is what I have been doing, which is continue to support our public safety officers by voting to appropriate money for special tools that enhance their enforcement, the automatic license plate readers, which make encounters with the public more safe and more effective I would continue to advocate for local control, as has been a hallmark of my time on council. I believe Mercer Island needs to have control over its own destiny on many, many issues. And I'm finding that one size fits all regional or state solutions often don't fit hardly anyone. In this case, Mercer Island already had a very, very progressive police force, was not having the problems that we saw in other parts of the country. And yet we find our police force, who is guilty of nothing, handcuffed in many ways in their ability to enforce the law. So I would advocate for local control to be returned to the cities on these items, and if not, to go to the legislature and get the necessary clarification for
Candidate Andrew,
the
your
laws.
time,
Yes.
your time has expired. Candidate accused, you now have 1 minute.
Thank you so much. I'd like to point out that I'm one of the only candidates that has actually worked with police directly on the ground. I've worked to remove encampments from Seattle parks in that role. A lot of misinformation on that topic. About the legislation at the state, I think we need to lobby hard at the state to repair one specific item, and that is the use of force policy, because that's what folks are talking about when they say we're handcuffed. The use of force policy is why our officers are afraid to make contact with people. And this is a huge problem. And while I agree that our police force was doing an excellent job, I say a rising tide lifts all boats. And we need to take Chief Holmes' excellent work and expand that across the state. We also need to get a social worker to support police and fire so that they can focus on crime fighting and not social work. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for your responses. We'll now move to question 4. You will each have 1 minute to respond to question 4, and the responses will begin with candidate accused. Question 4, what is your vision for our town center in terms of retail, housing, parking, and the use of public land, including the area adjacent to the Tully's building? Candidate accused, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I think we have a lot of really good code, and what I don't think we have is a vision. And by vision, I mean a picture. So there's a lot of little pictures of little things we can do, but I think we need to look at the big picture. I think that for a long time, our council has felt trapped in the 1970s layout of Mercer Island. And a lot of people are complaining that doesn't work. I do a lot of unbuilding in my work. We unbuild levees all the time to create salmon habitat. And I think it's possible to re-envision what that corridor looks like from the transit center through that Tully's property through downtown. We need to make it walkable. I love the idea that Councilmember Neese mentioned earlier about having a little police substation kind of there in that area. I think it should be a gateway and a welcoming gateway, and that's a place that the social worker could reside too. I would love to have a promenade coming out of that, maybe even a walkable one that didn't have cars on it, and a place where e-bikes can park and cars can park, and people can get there from all sorts of ways. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate accused. Candidate Andrell, you now have 1 minute.
Thank you. Right now, the City Council is heavily embroiled in working on the town center code, and I think what I hope we're moving toward is a town center code that preserves existing retail and restores retail. We have lost over 30,000 square feet of retail to redevelopment. I don't think that serves our residents at all. I think that if we do have additional housing, we have to have parking. I think if we can convert the Tully's property to a police substation, I think that's going to address some of the crime issues that we talked about in the last question. But my town center vision focuses on more options for our residents to obtain services and to gather and to dine on the island. That means preserving retail spaces, places like the areas where Chick's is and where Barrels and Lafette are, and I would work toward that in my next term.
Thank you, candidate Andrell. Candidate Becker, you now have 1 minute.
I'm so excited to get to work on improving our town center vision. This is such a huge opportunity for us as a city. When I talk to residents Everyone wants more restaurants. Everyone wants it to be more pleasant to walk around. I give the example of the building that Einstein is in. There's only Einstein and Great Clips in that building that are retail. When I was in high school in the 90s and would go there for lunch, there were at least 3 restaurants there. And now we have this huge Coldwell Banker space that's taking the corner that should be retail storefront. We need more retail. I'd love to see a central plaza as a concept, which is already in our plan as something that we could look at, surrounded by shops and retail. I support the council's plan to extend the length of retail store frontage. We need to make sure that most people are still going to be driving there, but that doesn't mean that even if you park there, you can walk around and actually enjoy it as a pleasant walk.
Thank you, Candidate Becker. Candidate Neese, you now have 1 minute.
Thanks. I hear from residents all the time that they'd like to see more restaurants and small retail, the approachable one-story type of retail that we see in Pagliacci's and Island Books. We're working on this right now, and we've remanded to the Planning Commission a groundbreaking new set of code that will preserve and expand retail beyond what we see in our town center. The existing current code has been producing about 0.112 as a ratio of parcel size to retail. We're upping that to over a quarter, 0.2623. So 135% increase in retail and small restaurant within town center. We need to work on parking codes so that people have a bunch of choices on how they park, where they park, and how they move around town center. And we need to look at the corridors, which are the streets through our town center, to reduce the speeds and the traffic volumes to make our town center more pleasant.
Thank you, Candidate Neese. Candidate Curry, you now have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Agree with potential candidate Becker. This is an exciting time to be on a council to help be part of this vision for what town center may look like in the future. I would love for my children to be able to come home, call Mercer Island home, and see the hard work that potentially Dad was able to do in creating this vision that we look to build. I'd love to see more retail in town center as well. It keeps Mercer Islanders on the island, creates additional revenues for the city. Along with that, we need to have better parking. With better parking, potentially comes better mobility, allowing families to gather and to walk and just do familial stuff. Storefront accessibility should be great. An example is at Nissaquah. They shut down Main Street, I believe it is, and open it up to restaurants. Just put tables out in the middle of the street. It's fantastic. I'd like to see more entrepreneurship and better opportunities for that with the addition of more retail space. And Tully's agreed. Police substations, fantastic idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Curry. Candidate Weinberg, you have 1 minute.
So there's a lot of opportunity in our town center for some careful urban planning. We want to make sure we're not confusing having more retail with having more diverse retail. If we just open up a whole bunch of space for retail, then we might end up with a lot of for lease signs. I think that here in the United States, we tend to rebuild on sites about every 50 years. And so if we have about 10% of the sites in downtown rebuild every 5 years, then at any one point in time, you're going to have this spectrum of the newest property, which is the most expensive property that has high margin retail, and then properties that are 5 to 10 years old, 10 to 15 years old, et cetera. And the ones that are the oldest properties where you're going to have some of the most affordable businesses. And having the business clustered together as well will allow for more walk-off parking. So people can park and then walk to the different businesses they want to go to.
Thank you for your responses, candidates. We'll now move to question 5. For question 5, you will each have 30 seconds to respond, and we'll begin with candidate Weinberg. Question 5. Training about racism for the City Council and staff was scheduled for the fall of 2020. Did this happen, and what were the results? If not, do you feel the city should sponsor this training and include the community? Candidate Weinberg, you.
So the short answer to your question is yes, it did happen. I took the training, and we have a a whole candidate forum planned on the 21st to be talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. But I believe the city needs to have a comprehensive plan amendment defining citywide goals for achieving better diversity, equity, inclusion. I think the city has opportunities to pursue diversity, equity, inclusion in 3 primary areas of its own workforce and how it does its contracting, and in helping with housing here on the island. And we should definitely be helping as city council with advancing DEI efforts.
Thank you, candidate Weinberg. Candidate Curry, you now have 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I think the city should lead in all areas of diversity and inclusion. Being Asian, I look forward to helping with that on the council. Diversity will go a long way with myself. I think Councilwoman Member Anderl, Councilmember Neese, and potentially other candidates as well can help with that as also. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Curry. Candidate Anderl, you now have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Yes, well, the short answer is it did happen, although it was virtual. So I think that's a little bit of a difficult way to do it. I like meeting in person, although this forum seems to be going well. I do agree that the city needs to lead on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I do know that at least the city manager, the city council, and the senior leadership team does consider those goals to be paramount. And by prioritizing those, I think that flows out into the community in a very positive way. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Anderl. Candidate accused, you now have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that training happened. I think the city really needs to get their act together on this. There are procurement policies, there are hiring policies, and there are housing policies that are really important to consider here. We know that there are socioeconomic differences among races in our community, and we need to have a diversity of housing in our community if we want to have a diverse community. I've done procurement practices to increase diversity with the city of Seattle. They've been very successful and included training programs. I think AmeriCorps is another great way to get there.
Thank you, candidate accused. Candidate Neese, you now have 30 seconds.
As a parent and a person of color, this is a really important issue for me personally, and I carry that into my work as your current city council member. We need to ensure equity in all city operations. Every policy, procedure, and decision should reflect our values of promoting inclusivity and celebrating diversity. Our city council should lead by example as we listen, reflect, and continually improve all aspects of city government. Last June, we signed and renewed a commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion. Beyond just signing this proclamation, we need to realize the importance of actually doing the work to combat racism in our community. So we did implement anti-racist bias and cultural competency training.
I'm sorry, candidate Neese, your time has expired. Candidate Becker, you now have 30 seconds.
Well, I definitely think that the city council needs to be leaders on this topic, and we absolutely should have these types of trainings. And anyone interested in this, I would encourage to watch the Equity Forum on the 21st. But I would like to also highlight how exciting it is that among the 6 of us, there's only, with nothing against the candidate Weinberg, there's only one straight white man who is on screen here. And I think that is an example of our city trying to be leaders in general with diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, candidates, for your responses. We'll now move on to question 6. For question 6, you'll have 30 seconds each to respond, and we'll begin the responses with candidate Becker. Question 6. As a city council member, what ideas do you have to create sustainable funding for youth and family services? And candidate Becker, you have 30 seconds.
Well, the main fundings for youth and family services are the Thrift Shop and the Youth and Family Services Foundation. I think the Thrift Shop, there's opportunities to try to look at expanding a sorting center into other areas that would allow us to significantly increase it there. I also know that they've gone to a lot of e-commerce, which personally that's in my wheelhouse in terms of my career. And I would love to get in there and help the thrift shop increase revenues to support youth and family services.
Thank you, candidate Becker. Candidate Neese, you have 30 seconds.
Mercer Island has received over $7.2 million in ARPA COVID relief funds. At the next council meeting, I'm going to recommend that we fully fund YFS through the 2022 biennium. We also created a financial reserve to fully fund through the 6-month gap that is the gap between the school calendar and the city calendar. I will do everything possible to fully fund the school counselors using ARPA funds and funds available from the city's general fund.
Thank you, candidate Neese. Candidate Curry, 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I believe that we should do everything we can to help sustain the youth and family services, including budgeting out and hard budgeting that money for an extended period of time if we possibly can, to create consistency in that area. Along with Daniel, e-commerce is also in my wheelhouse as well. I'd love to see a plan on how to make that happen. Potentially look forward to working with you as well on that. So thank you.
Thank you, candidate Curry. Candidate Weinberg, 30 seconds.
So in 2020, we had to shut down the thrift shop due to the pandemic. And there is a charitable nonprofit organization called Youth and Family Services Foundation, which generously opened their coffers to help YFS to stay afloat until the federal ARPA one-time funds arrived. The key takeaway from all that is that the thrift shop is not as reliable or permanent a source of funding as we once thought. And the city council should continue to explore additional plans for a recurring funding source for YFS that can survive.
Thank you, candidate Weinberg. Candidate Accused, you have 30 seconds.
Hi, thank you. I think there was a missed opportunity in the fall of 2020 to expand the thrift shop. And
Candidate Accused, can I just ask you to stop for a moment because the clock has not reset. And I'm hoping we can get the clock to reset. There we go.
Okay, so I think there was a missed opportunity. I think it was rushed. I would love to work with whatever council members are there in the future. Maybe do a little How Government Works 101. The SEPA process would have helped quite a bit with that. And a scoping study and a siting study are necessary in order to make something like that happen. So I would love to revisit that idea. E-commerce too, we've got to figure out a way to do that. And that might mean having to move the staff to a little bit more professional. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Accused. And candidate Andrew, 30 seconds.
Yes, I also support using the ARPA funding to bridge fully funding youth and family services until we know what sort of revenue is reasonable to expect from the thrift shop and the foundation. I absolutely support a permanent funding source, not only for the school counselors, but for all of the services that youth and family services provide. I don't agree that with an expansion on the thrift shop, possibly an electronic expansion to e-commerce, but not a physical one. We studied that and we found that it just did not pencil out. It was too expensive.
Thank you for your responses, candidates. We're now going to move to the next question. You'll have 30 seconds for the next question, and we'll begin with candidate Andrew. Homelessness is not very visible on Mercer Island, but it does exist. It is not only an issue for adults who are homeless, but also for the next generation. What solutions would you suggest? What do you feel is Mercer Island's responsibility to participate in regional solutions? Candidate Andrew, you have 30 seconds.
Mercer Island does participate in regional solutions and in local solutions. Mercer Island contributes money to a regional coalition for housing to create affordable housing, particularly in geographic areas where it makes sense, where the land is cheaper. Mercer Island also, through the Youth and Family Services, has the ability to assist with rental assistance to prevent homelessness in the first place. And now we have outreach through the police department and our partnership with homeless organizations to do outreach to people in need. So I feel as though we are covering a lot of bases in a good way.
Thank you, candidate Andrew. Candidate accused, 30 seconds.
Hi there. I think the city should definitely have a person working very closely with the Regional Homelessness Authority. That's a huge opportunity with new funding. And because we have a lot of fiscally conservative and moderate people on this island, I think we should make sure we're participating and make sure our values are represented at that table. I also would really like to see that the fire chief and the police chief have a social services outreach worker that is a full-time employee. I don't think relying on small little $10,000 here, $5,000 there is the way to go. We need to seriously dedicate ourselves to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate accused. Candidate Weinberg, you have 30 seconds.
So homelessness is a complex global issue that tends to be more accentuated in large economic centers like Seattle. There is no simple or fast solution. It involves how societies treat their mentally ill, how we address drug addiction. It involves where do we draw the line between where one's right to liberty and where one hasn't the inability to make sound decisions. As an affluent and compassionate community of 25,000 people, we as Mercer Islanders need to foster relationships in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors to work in concert towards a solution to homelessness.
Thank you, candidate Weinberg. Candidate Curry, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I think addressing the homeless problem boils down to compassion and empathy. Some folks are in situations they don't want to be in, not by their own choosing. I do agree that we should do more. I think the ordinance in its current capacity is doing exactly what it was intended to do, which is to get folks help, whether they realize it or not. Chief and his commander actually reported out very favorable results around that. And I look forward to working with folks to make it better if we can. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Curry. Candidate Neese, you have 30 seconds.
You know, we've worked hard to make relationships with homeless agencies and social assistance services. We have YFS, Housing Assistance Fund, that has kept numerous people in their homes during the pandemic. We have ARCH to help create affordable housing units. And we have a strong public safety ordinance, connect people with homelessness to services. And we've just now implemented social workers in the East Side shelters to help Mercer Island Police Department with their outreach to those experiencing homelessness. We need to continue to invest in these relationships and expand these services, but I think this is the path forward.
Thank you, candidate Neese. Candidate Becker, 30 seconds.
I've heard a number of people that tell me that they want us to pull up the drawbridge, but last time I checked, I-90 doesn't have a drawbridge. So whether you want to or not, we need to work with the region in order to try to solve this problem. I'm excited that the Regional Authority for Homelessness has been created. The CEO sounds super smart and knows what he's doing. He's talked a lot about how we need more data. We don't know how many people experiencing homelessness there are in the region. We need to know why people are refusing services. Our actions need to be based on the data.
Thank you for your responses, candidates. The next question will be our last question before closing arguments or closing statements. You'll have 30 seconds for the last question. We'll begin with candidate Curry. The last question is, do you support outsourcing of the fire department? Why or why not? Candidate Curry, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I think that outsourcing the fire department is an extremely hot topic right now, potentially radioactive, I would say. I think it requires some serious thought. I think it should be a data-driven decision whether we do or not. I think we need to look at the budget and where the money's coming from and what the impact of programs might be should the decision be to keep the Mercer Island Fire Department on island or contract with offshore or off-island resources. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Curry. Candidate Weinberg, you have 30 seconds.
I do not support outsourcing our fire department. The number one responsibility of city government is the safety of its residents. The Mercer Island Fire Department, as assessed by a neutral third party and industry expert in 2020, is one of the most efficient and effective fire departments in the state. As a city, it is our duty to ensure that our firefighters stay focused on saving our lives instead of having to worry about saving their jobs.
Thank you, candidate Weinberg. Candidate Hughes, 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. Clearly, based on the voting record, this is somewhere where I differ from my opponent. I absolutely 100% do not think we should outsource our fire department on the basis of, like Ted said, those wonderful studies that have been done and shown. There's a lot of heat, I guess, about overtime and unions. It's a lot of ideology. We've got great firefighters. We don't want 200 people rotating in and out. We want the 28, 29 people that our seniors know and love. And those are the people we want in our living rooms every day. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate accused. Candidate Andrew, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I think my opponent fundamentally misunderstands my vote on this issue and misunderstands what outsourcing might mean. And it troubles me that she is willing to make a decision without any financial underpinnings. Outsourcing the fire department, which I never recommended, I recommended we look at whether it made sense to do that, would mean we would maintain our services, we would maintain our fire stations, we would maintain our firefighters, but we potentially save money on administrative costs by sharing battalion chiefs or fire chiefs in such a way that we don't have to diminish services to cover the budget. So I am in favor of continuing to study and look at that and not make a decision without any financial underpinnings.
Thank you, candidate Andrew. Candidate Becker, 30 minutes.
My overall priority on council would be to try to improve your quality of life. I do not believe that outsourcing the fire department to Bellevue, even though we would keep the fire stations on Mercer Island, would improve your quality of life. There's a lot of discussion about overtime within the fire department. There is no one on council or in this screen who has as much business experience as I have in terms of managing employees and overtime. I understand how it works and I understand how it needs to be managed.
Thank you, candidate Becker. Candidate Neese, 30 seconds, please.
I hear how important this issue is to Islanders and that they have a local emergency number to call and an immediate local response when assistance is needed. I can say that I hold those same values. When an emergency happens, we must have an immediate local response, and that's non-negotiable for me. I will ensure that Mercer Island has Mercer Island firefighters on it if reelected this fall.
Thank you, candidates. We'll now begin closing statements. You will each have 30 seconds and we'll begin with candidate Neese.
Thank you. I recognize our time is limited on this forum. My commitment to you and our community extends beyond this Zoom forum. I'm available to meet or respond to your questions. Please feel free to email me at your convenience or meet with me at the many upcoming community events between now and the election. I'm excited to continue progress on the many initiatives we've started, implemented, and have yet to adopt. I'm a results-oriented council member, experienced in collaboration, negotiation, and delivery. I ask for your vote to continue our efforts to represent your interests. Please visit my website, votenice.com.
Thank you, candidate Nice. Candidate Becker, you have 30 seconds.
One unexpected side effect of campaigning has been meeting a ton of nice people. A common thread among everyone has been a desire to keep our community special, a small town in the middle of a lake in between two major cities. But even as we work to retain our small community charm, I am optimistic that our best days are ahead of us. I'd ask you to be optimistic with me, improve our town center, become leaders on climate, foster a positive community for our kids. And regardless of who you vote for, I have one request. Please be kind. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Becker. Candidate Weinberg, you have 30 seconds.
I will work hard to maintain and rebuild our core services, which support our quality of life, the public safety, fire and police, public works, youth and family services, and parks and recreation. I will also leverage my strong relationships with other governmental agencies, both on and off the island, to ensure Mercer Island is fairly represented on matters that affect all of us. My name is Ted Weinberg again, running for seat 4, and I appreciate your vote next week.
Thank you, candidate Weinberg. Candidate Curry, 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. The City Council can do better, be better. The citizens of Mercer Island, when they vote, will entrust the City Council to be transparent and make the best decisions with the available information that they currently have. I'm excited to represent you. A vote for Curry ensures that your best interests are first. Thank you very much.
Thank you, candidate Curry. Candidate Andro, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I just want to say that I'm running for re-election because I love this community and I want to continue to serve it. We have a lot of complex issues facing us, but I don't think any of them are insurmountable. And I think if we continue to work together as we have over the past couple of years, we can reach a lot of success. In this regard, I think continuity of leadership is really important, and I will bring that. I have no learning curve to experience. You know how I'm going to vote because you can see how I have voted, and I will preserve the interests of this community overall. Please give me your vote in this month and in November.
Thank you, candidate Andro. Candidate accused, 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. As I stated at the beginning of this forum, my priorities are Mercer Island Youth and Family Services and a Parks Conservancy and getting stable funding for them. We have excellent police and fire services. I would like to maintain those. And I would like to actually improve them and support them by offering a social services outreach worker to work through them to bridge YFS, parks, and fire. I think this is a critical thing that needs to happen so we can move forward in a community with harmony and address these really sticky issues that we're facing today. And I thank you, and I hope I can earn your vote.
Thank you, candidates. This will conclude our forum. We'd like to thank the candidates for their willingness to participate in this forum and to serve their communities by running for office. We'd also like to thank the audience for your participation. And now I'll turn it back over to Julie.
Well, I have to say the same round of thanks, and especially to the audience. Without you, we wouldn't have a forum. And it's been just a great experience to hear all these voices. I know communities where positions have gone unchallenged, and we actually have some real substantive things going on here. Ballots are dropping tomorrow. It's amazing. We're starting our election season. So I hope you'll all take a look at Vote 411. Not only do we have our wonderful Mercer Island candidates on the ballot, but we also have the King County Executive. We have port commissioners, and something I need to find out about, airport district commissioners. So it's time for us to start looking at all the various resources that are out there and get our ballots in. Thanks a bunch for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.